Welcome to the Creating Wealth Simplified podcast. My name is Lauren Wells, here with my co-host, Chris Seveny. We're committed to providing you with the knowledge required to build wealth through real estate investing. Tired of consuming content about real estate? Stuck in analysis paralysis? Ready to do your first deal? As a member of our community, you will learn how to go from consuming content to taking that first step into the world of real estate investing. Our show is not about getting rich quick, but about providing you with the knowledge you need to take action. Join us as we speak with experienced investors who share action tips on how to escape the corporate world, start a thriving side hustle in the world of real estate, and go beyond your W-2 or 401k. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us today on the Creating Wealth Simplified podcast, where each week we are bringing you education and information that will help you take your next step in building wealth through real estate. I am your host, Lauren Wells, and joining me today is Doug Spence. Doug is an active duty naval officer and founder of Honor and Equity, which is a real estate resource for military veterans and their families. Doug personally owns real estate in multiple states, is an LP investor on 4 syndications, and is currently a co-GP of an RV park syndication. And Doug, I found out earlier today, actually also lives in San Diego. So another California person on the podcast, which I always love. So welcome, Doug. Glad to have you here today.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Actually, let's just kind of back up. How'd you get started in real estate?
Yeah, so I bought my first property back in 2016, and it was just a primary residence. I was living in Pensacola, Florida at the time, stationed there. And I just started listening to Bigger Pockets, and my real estate analysis was very beginner at that time. And I knew that I was renting a house for $1,500, and I did the math and I realized I could buy a house in the same neighborhood that was bigger and newer, and my mortgage would be $1,100 a month. So based on that simple math, I was like, I think it makes sense to buy. And so I did, and it ended up working out really well. I still own that property today, and I rent it out for much more than the mortgage payment. So it worked out. Yeah. And
so Bigger Pockets, that was kind of the first thing you mentioned. I know a lot of people are familiar with Bigger Pockets, listen to their podcast, dive into their forums. One thing that I hear a lot is it's really overwhelming. There's so many options and so much to do. So how did you, I guess, block out all the noise and just kind of focus and try to learn as much without getting kind of like lost in all the information?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because once you get into the real estate and entrepreneurship world, you realize there's so much opportunity out there, especially once you join a mastermind group, that there's so many ways to make money in real estate that it's easy to get distracted and chase lots of different opportunities.
Yeah.
And I think it's just being really clear on, your personal goals. And if you have a spouse, then making sure you have a clear idea of what your joint goals are, and then back everything up from there to a strategy that suits, your risk tolerance, your long-term goals, your access to capital, your experience, and all that. So I think it's just focusing on the end, starting with the end in mind, and then, and then having a mentor. Being in a mastermind group is a great way to bounce ideas off of people and leverage the experience and wisdom of other people as well.
Yeah. So when you were doing your initial kind of information gathering, I'll call it, on Bigger Pockets, what were some areas, obviously you purchased your home because you realized, wait, I'm paying way more to rent, but what were some initial areas that you had looked at other than, purchasing your home, when you were looking at how do I get started? I guess asset classes or ways to invest in real estate.
I was wanting to keep it simple. I knew from the beginning, because I'm in the military, that I'd be moving. We move roughly every 2 to 3 years. So I knew I'd have to be comfortable from the beginning with out of state investing and having property managers and all that, that concept, because I knew I wasn't going to be in the same place forever. Some people have an advantage where they invest where they live and they build a network there and they grow their portfolio there. And I wouldn't have that advantage necessarily. So David Green's book, Long Distance Real Estate Investing, was one of the first real estate books I read, and it was hugely impactful for me. And it helped me overcome the mental hurdle that I think a lot of people have of the idea of buying a property that you've never been to, or a property that you've, in a place you've never been, is scary to a lot of people. But that book really helped me overcome that mental, that ceiling, I guess, that mental obstacle. And that was hugely impactful and helped me become comfortable buying out of state, which was my second, third, and fourth property purchase were all out of state, and properties that I had never been to before. So.
Oh, love that. Because that is something you hear a lot, with people right now. For example, we live in California. A lot of people I know want to start, their real estate journey and look around and think, okay, well, obviously California is not where I'm going to be able to get in. So then they think of out of state if they want to go kind of the rental route or long-term, short-term, whatever it is. And then they kind of get stuck there because, like you said, there's that, wait, I haven't been to the area. I have no idea like what the market rate is or what like makes sense. What area within an area is a good place versus like, is this a bad, right across the street isn't a great neighborhood or whatever it might be. So I love that. I love that book recommendation because I do think that, I know I even have had that issue where it was, wait, do I really want to invest in a city I've never been to and a house I've seen only in a picture? So let's talk about that. So you had your home you bought in Pensacola. Now, what was your next kind of investment?
So I heard someone on the Bigger Pockets Money podcast talking about turnkey real estate investing, and Stu Grazier was his name, and he was also in naval aviation like I am. And so there was already that trust, like, oh, this guy's also in the Navy, naval aviation. And so, and I reached out to him, I think on Bigger Pockets, actually, on the forums. And I was like, hey, I listened to your podcast, liked everything, let me, can we talk more? I want to get into real estate investing. And so we chatted. And then not long after that, he was like, hey, we have a property available for purchase in Milwaukee. And so that's, pulled the trigger on that and bought that first property. And then bought another one from them only 4 or 5 months later. And then after that, I helped them out by referring a lot of people to them. So their wait list grew to like 1.5 to 2 years long. And so I kind of shot myself in the foot in a sense, because I had to wait. I think it was another 1.5 until I bought the third one. But by that time I had caught the bug and I was like, okay, I want to do more than turnkey, which got me into like doing the out of state burrs and all that. But the turnkey model was a great way to dip my toe in real estate investing, where it's not a primary residence, but you're also not having to put an entire team together to run the rehab and all that kind of stuff, which is complicated. But it was a good way to buy a dedicated investment property. It was just like kind of like the next logical step.
So a couple of things I think are so interesting about that is you found someone in the space. Obviously, like you mentioned, mentorship has been and is a huge part of getting into any industry at all. But you just heard his podcast and emailed him. And I think that that's something I talk about this. People listening are probably like, oh, here she goes. I think it's so important to just kind of not have fear about just emailing someone or on LinkedIn, messaging them, or, going to their website and contacting them, because I don't know about you, but I found most people in this space to be super open to helping and, having a 10, 15, 20-minute conversation. And what that shows is, one, you kind of built that trust because, like you said, you're in the similar industry. You're like, okay, naval aviation, there was that built trust. And so when he brought you that deal, I'm curious, what was your due diligence process when he brought you that deal from Milwaukee?
So I was looking at the numbers and, it made sense. I was still pretty new when it came to all that. And he kind of helped walk me through the process. And I really put a lot of faith into my analysis of people more so than my analysis of like, because I was pretty new when it came to real estate. So it was more like, I think I can trust this person based off of, reference. I think I got a couple of references as well, people that had invested with it before. And it was really trusting the people, which I think has been a theme throughout my real estate journey. Is it's so much more important vetting the people than it is the deal itself. I mean, obviously the deal has to make sense in a market that makes sense, but if you do it with the wrong people, it can go really bad. So it just illustrates the importance of vetting the people, vetting the team,
Yeah.
and the integrity and character of those people is for me much more important than what the return is and all that stuff. It's important, of course, but it's not as important as the team.
Well, I think it comes down to like nothing's guaranteed, right?
Mhm.
So what you can control is really like you said, vetting the people. And I'm of the same train of thought. And I asked you that question because I had a feeling that you were going to say that, obviously I looked at the numbers, they made sense, but at the end of the day, it was really your trust in this sponsor, essentially equivalent, who brought you this deal, that they weren't going to screw you over essentially and walk away and you be left hanging with a property that made no sense. So
Right.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, when you're investing in a fund or working with anyone, I feel like in any industry, any business, I think the people is number one to the product, and the product, obviously, like you said, has to make sense. But if things go, I always think, okay, if worst case happens, is this sponsor, if you're investing in a fund, are they going to try to hide the truth, or are they going to come forward to their investors and say, this is where we're at. This is the situation. And I don't necessarily think there's a, and maybe you have a way of kind of defining that or feeling that out in a, sponsor or people you work with. But that's something for me that's really, I go off of, my gut feel with people a lot. So
yeah, I think a good question to ask a sponsor or, really anyone that you're looking to work with is, asking them for a time where they did a deal that didn't go as planned and what happened and how did they handle it? How do they handle adversity? Ideally, it's something where they're handling other people's money or something like that.
Yeah.
And you can see, and then, get that reference, ask to talk to people that have worked with them, and, usually they will be honest with their experience as well. I think that's really important. Yeah. And just to illustrate a point with that turnkey company and those guys. So there was one of the properties I bought from them, there was some issue with the roof, and the property management company was like, hey, here's an issue. The roofer recommends a new roof. It's $8,000. Let us know what you want us to do. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I emailed the guys and I was like, hey, what do you guys recommend? And they were like, don't worry about it. We'll take care of it, or something like that. Like I didn't have to buy a new roof or something. And it wasn't, I think it was probably not even that long after I bought the property, like within a year or so.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, wow, that's good. Cause if they were not, they didn't have to do that. Based off of like,
that's definitely above and beyond for sure.
Right.
Especially at like a year, you're
right. Because by that time the transaction is already complete. They could have easily and been totally justified in saying like, sorry, we're not responsible for blah, blah, blah. But then now would I have referred more people to them? Like definitely not, so it just goes back to integrity and character of people that you work with, and make sure you're vetting them as people more so than the deals themselves. So
awesome. So kind of jumping to a topic that might kind of go hand in hand with what we're talking about, while you were doing all of this, you were still working, correct?
Yeah, I am still working.
Yeah. So how did you, because I mentioned this earlier, before we started recording, about how, we have a lot of people who are listening that may just quit their job and go full, blown real estate investing, and that's all they do all day, every day. But we also have a good amount of people who are trying to do exactly that. They're working in their full-time jobs. They may or may not have a mortgage, kids, wife, other responsibilities. How did you balance all that and kind of still progress things forward? Like, did you set goals? Like what, how did that work?
I will say it was a lot easier before we had our son. So we have, he's about 9.5 months old now, and he's great, but it's definitely, I don't have as much free time and I don't have as much, I'm not as well rested as I used to be.
Mm-hmm.
It's been better, since the first few months, obviously, but yeah, it's just a lot of, I would say before we had kids, I had, I would spend a few hours before going. I've always been an early riser. So I wake up early. I wake up at 4:30 Pacific time and now, and, work on stuff, read, journal, etc. And I was able to spend even more time before we had our son, before work, and on the weekends, whether it's connecting, calls with people or analyzing deals or whatever. Now that don't have as much time. I have to be really careful how I spend my time and making sure I'm doing, the things that only I can do, and other stuff outsource. If it's a $10 or a $15 an hour kind of task, I try to outsource that as best as possible to someone else. And try to limit the, what I'm doing to like the $300 an hour task or 500 or whatever, what's the stuff that only I can do? Like I can't hire someone on Upwork to be a podcast guest for me,
Yeah.
So, but I can hire someone on Upwork to edit videos for me, which is what I was just, looking and talking to someone. So
Yeah.
that's an example of, if you're a full-time W-2 person like I am, you have to be comfortable delegating. You have to be comfortable prioritizing your time. And, once you have a family, and this is something I, am not perfect at, but something I work towards is fitting real estate and business around family and not the other way around, making sure that family is first and everything fits around that. So that's another thing that was a challenging transition for me after our son was born, but it's gotten better. And I just have to accept that I'm not able to spend as much time doing real estate stuff, and that's fine. So, because that's not the most important thing, but yeah, it's a transition for sure.
Yeah. And it gets easier. I mean, I have two boys, a little bit older, 5 and 2. And, you'll have more time. I'm told
Right.
I'll have more time too. So I'm looking forward to that day.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but I think, something you just touched upon was, and I think probably goes back to your why, is fitting real estate around your family. Because I think it's so easy when whether you're investing in real estate or you're moving into the entrepreneurial world, to forget work so much that you forget that like you're trying to buy your freedom. And instead, like there's like a fine line. So how do you maintain, trying to buy more time by investing or having your own business with like not giving up all these moments now with your family?
Yeah, that's a really good subject or topic, because it really depends on what season of your life you're in. So like right now, I'm not going to be. I plan on staying in the Navy through 20 years. So I'm at 14 years right now. So I have my horizon is pretty long. Now, if I was going to be leaving my W-2 in 18 months, I'd probably be a lot more aggressive on the real estate than I am now to replace, my income. But I'm on a pretty good trajectory right now to reach my goals by the time I retire, to hit our passive income goals. So I don't really need to, hit the accelerator on, all the way to the floor right now. I'd rather be able to spend more time with my son and my wife, because I don't really need to. So it's just different season of your life. Maybe you're in the season of growth where you don't have kids yet, or maybe it's a time where you're going to be in a transition phase soon. So you need to focus more on it, but it just depends on the season of your life that you're in. But I think a lie that some people tell themselves is, whether it's working to climb that corporate ladder, I think people lie to themselves and they say, oh, I'm doing it for my family, and it's like, okay, well, if you're already making good money, like, does your kid need to, go to that 5-star resort? Or are they fine with a 3-star resort? If you're working, going from 60 hours a week to 80 hours a week, is that really what your kid needs? Or is that what you want for your own ego, for your own personal goals? So I think it's we have to be honest with ourselves about what our kids really need, what our families really need from us. And usually it's more time, not more money. But it's different for everyone. So, and everyone's goals. So, but I think we just got to be honest with ourselves and what we want.
Yeah. I mean, I am by no means a parenting expert, and this is not a parenting podcast, but I will say that every parent I've looked at that that I see as, wow, you're a great parent. They've always said as much time as you can give them. They don't care about anything else. So I really take that to heart. And it's something that, my husband and I really focus on, is that, like you said, fitting everything else around our family. But something else you mentioned was, I like how you broke down if it's a $15 task versus an hour task versus a $300 an hour. And I think that's important, because a lot of people now get that, okay, to grow, to scale, or to continue down this path while I'm working my full-time job, I'm going to need to outsource. I can't do it all. But then it's like what do I outsource? And so I've never actually heard anyone define it quite like you did, where it's like, is this a $15 an hour task or a $300 an hour task? And I think that just when I'm thinking of my day to day, I'm like, oh yeah, that makes it really clear. There are definitely things that I have delegated off, and there are definitely things that I'm like, this is what I should be working on. This moves the needle forward. So I love that you kind of put a dollar amount to it so that people listening might think, oh yeah, I have a lot of $15 an hour tasks I should not be doing.
Yeah. And I think for, your real estate investors that, they have a few properties and maybe they're still working full time, or that's where they want to be, like a really easy one to outsource in the beginning is the bookkeeping. Because there's, if you have a few properties, in the beginning, it's easy because you've got 4 transactions a month. But once you get to, like, we have 6 or so, including the ones that are LLC owns. And I mean, that's a lot of transactions, and that's a lot. That's not passive. That's not passive income anymore when you're working through all those statements. And like, I was looking at emails today where it's like, oh, the tenant wants to do a 6-month, like, and I'm like, okay, well, is the leasing fee the same amount if it's 6 months versus 12 months? So I'm trying to weigh the benefit of, like, if it's just a 6-month lease, how much more are we going to charge for that? So it's like, it's passive, but it's not really passive. So I think bookkeeping is a really good first step to outsource. And you can find bookkeepers for cheap. And it's a good, unless you're someone that you're like, I really love the bookkeeping accounting aspect, but I think bookkeeping and CPA is like a really easy way to outsource and have someone. It's not only the $15 an hour, like, is it not worth your time, but you can probably find someone not only to get it off your plate, but someone that's doing it better than you were doing it. And I think that's another thing people don't think about. If someone else is handling your taxes and your bookkeeping, they're probably doing way better than you could do it. And it's freeing you up to do more important things.
Yeah. I remember when I had my first consulting business, I decided to do my own bookkeeping. And now when I see other people starting, I'm like, outsource that. That took up so much of my time. And I probably ended up paying to have things redone that I was doing incorrectly. And I wish now I'm like, that is not my strength. Someone else can do that.
Right.
That is not my area of expertise.
Yeah. But you have to be intentional, and that's working on your business and not in your business. So it takes, my 2 favorite business books, Traction by Gino Wickman and The Road Less Stupid by Keith Cunningham. Those are both fantastic books, and they both touch on that concept. So,
yeah. So what are some things, along the way? Did you have the out of state? Are all your properties out of state at this point?
Yes.
Okay. And then now you also moved from owning real estate into being an LP on a few syndications. How did those kind of come about?
It's really just the network. So I joined the first syndication was is one that was partially put together by the guys that I bought the turnkey properties from, some of my first investment properties. And I didn't even know what a syndication was, and they sent it out, and I was like, okay, this sounds good. Mobile home park. Okay. I've never considered buying one of those before, but okay. And then, so they explained to me like what it was. And I was like, are you guys investing in this too? Your own personal money? They're like, yep. And I was like, okay, I'm in. So that was kind of my first foray into syndications. And then I joined GoBundance back in October of 2021. And so, you could throw a rock into GoBundance and hit a syndicator. So it's really just, it's people that I've gotten to know personally before I invested with them. So it's not, which I think is important as well, and that just goes to vetting the people. So that's how I got into that. And so I'm an LP in 4 right now. And then one of those I'm also a co-GP on. And that just kind of goes to one of my goals, which is kind of the natural progression of the real estate investor, which is just kind of going bigger, like graduating from single family homes into bigger stuff. And it's also for me, as time becomes more and more precious, it's where can I get the biggest time ROI? And it's probably not, doing a burr on a, crappy house in Tulsa, Oklahoma anymore. It's probably doing, focusing on my skill set, what I am good at, in a team with other people on bigger deals. So that's what I've started doing more of, and what I'm wanting to do moving forward is, more of that, going bigger, focusing on my strengths and being on teams of people that where everyone is doing what they're best at. So
yeah, I love that. And I'm super familiar with GoBundance, but and I know Chris is part of it, but what you mentioned earlier, and I'm sure since you landed on GoBundance, that's the group that you're with, but how you mentioned masterminds and networking, there's a ton out there, especially in the real estate space, but just in general, there's a ton of masterminds. How did you kind of find, I guess, your tribe, your people, and decide to go with GoBundance, for example? Or had you tried other networking, groups before that?
yeah, I'm in two masterminds right now. So the first one I joined was in April of 2020, and it's a group. It's called the War Room. It's all military folks, both active duty and veteran, that are involved in real estate in some capacity, different skill levels and all that. So that's the first one I joined, still in that one. And that one's great. And then I had always heard Brandon Turner and David Green talk about GoBundance on the Bigger Pockets podcast. And I looked into it and I was like, oh, wow, someday I'll, join that. And then someday came faster than I thought it would as far as the net worth requirement. So, and then I joined in October of 2021, big time imposter syndrome, being in there, but that's kind of, I feel more at home with it now than I did in the beginning. But, and I say more at home with it. It's been great the entire time, but I felt like an imposter, for the first 6 months or so, because there's high level people all around. And you're like, I don't belong in here, So,
but do you think to a sense that a lot of people in the room feel that?
100%. I imagine all of them feel it at some point.
Like there's always someone bigger or that feels bigger. And even when you hit that next level of, say you're going from using your own money to other people's money to a bigger fund, I feel like you always feel like, oh, I'm still small compared to, the multi-billion-dollar fund. And
right. Exactly.
I'm sure they have their people, but yeah, I feel like everyone in those rooms feels like that to an extent in their own way.
And that's the double-edged sword of being in a group like Abundance. Is it's great because you're in a bigger room. There's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of people where you can ask questions and leverage their experience in different areas, but there's also, comparison is the thief of joy, right? So, and that's where another great book, The Gap and the Gain, which is a fantastic one to read. I read it twice last year. The second time was because I felt like I needed to read it again, but that's a really good book. And it's a good way to keep yourself in the right headspace, because it's easy to compare yourself to other people, especially in a group like that. And, but everyone, another thing I learned in GoBundance is no matter the net worth or anything, everyone has their struggles. Everyone is battling something. Everyone has their own obstacles they need to overcome. And, some of them, some are money related, some aren't, some it's, because there's folks in there that are worth 8-9 figures, but don't have a relationship with their daughters or sons, so it's like, and that goes back to what I was talking about before, where it's like, yeah, if you can chase money, but you can't get that time back with family. So it's about finding that balance. And I think GoBundance has been a good place to share with other guys, the struggles and different challenges and be open about different things like that. I think people join for the money reasons and net worth and all that stuff, and people stay for the authentic relationships, I think. So
I like it. Love it. And then you started, and I mentioned this in your intro, Honor and Equity. So how did that come about?
Right. So that first mastermind group that I joined, the War Room, I was inspired. I think it was actually a post by the guy that I bought that first property from, the turnkey one, but he challenged people to start their own thought leadership platform just to share their journey and all that. And so I did, and started using it as a way to just document my journey, share what I've learned, etc. So I started writing articles, blogs. Those are still on the website, but I think my mom was the only one that read them. So we, started getting into Instagram, doing more reels, and because people want 20-second video clips more than they'll read a 800-word article, 1,000-word article. So, but it started as a way to just document my journey, and then it's evolved into a way for me to help military members, veterans, and their family members grow their own portfolios. And so I do a lot of my free time is spent mentoring them one-on-one for free, just helping them helping them out, helping them grow their portfolio, sharing what I've learned over the last few years, whether it's doing burrs or flips out of state, putting teams together, syndication stuff, just helping them out however I can. And that's my way of like giving back. Because like you said, further earlier on, it's a community, real estate communities, a lot of people helping each other out. So I think, and I was helped out, so I got to help other people out. And it's very rewarding to do so, especially for fellow military folks. So.
Yeah, it definitely is. I feel like, there have been people that I have met because someone made an introduction, and it's kind of, as with anything, trust and knowing someone or knowing someone who referred to you because they trusted you, like that just connection helps, build your confidence as an investor. And so like, how can you kind of pay that forward? So I love that. I love that, that you're doing that. That's cool.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. It's been a lot of fun, meeting people, and I'm just a real junkie when it comes to just chatting real estate with people anyway. So it kind of scratches that itch, but also, a lot of the stuff they're going through is stuff that I was doing myself 2-3 years ago. So it's still very fresh for me. And I think my superpower is connecting people. So it's easy for me to, you need to talk to this guy or talk to this lender or whatever. So and it's such an easy way to provide massive value to people.
Yeah.
Just connecting them, sending an email. I mean, it's so easy, but you can make such a big impact on people. So
love that. And so we always like to ask this question, if you were going to give one action tip for someone who was starting their real estate investing journey today, in this economic climate, we'll add that little in there as well. What would your advice be?
First off, be very clear about what you want, where you want to be. Once you identify that, find someone that is already doing or has already done what you want to do, and find a way to provide value to them without expecting anything in return. And I think they will reciprocate, and you'll be able to learn from that individual. And I think that's a good way to get into it.
Yeah, man, I wish I was lying when I said that none of our podcast guests have probably met each other, but that one comes up a lot, is finding someone who's done what you're looking to do and find a way to provide value to them without expecting anything in return.
Yeah, that last part is key.
Yeah, definitely. Like zero expectations. What can I do for you? And like you and I both agree, this industry is super kind and super willing to help. So, if you do that and it's not someone that you connect with the first time, like I would say, like reach out to multiple people. Like don't just find one person, find multiple people who you might resonate with, because you might hit 4 different people, but one of them you click with. And it's really just finding that one person that you click with that can, like you're the guy who got you your second, I guess, investment property, kind of change your trajectory. So that's awesome.
Yeah. And I think the way, I could see someone asking, well, how do I find that person? I think the 2 best ways would be go to in-person meetups wherever you live, and then join a mastermind group. I think one of the biggest accelerators of my growth has been, if not the biggest accelerator, has been mastermind groups, because you're surrounding yourself with like-minded people that have already done what you want to do, people that will hold you accountable, people you can ask questions to, and they can give advice. Because a lot of times, like this space, it's easy to you get blinded by your own problem that you're in. And then the solution is incredibly simple, but you just can't see it. So you just ask your group and they're like, oh, well, have you thought about this? And you're like, oh, that makes sense. And then, but if you're trying to do it by yourself, I mean, it's not going to work. So it's being in a mastermind group, even if you have to pay money to be in it. Some of them are more expensive than others, but it's hugely valuable.
Yeah, I'd agree. So tell us where, if listeners want to, reach out to you, learn more about you or connect with you, how can they do so? How can they find you?
Yeah. So we're on Instagram at Honor and Equity, and Twitter as well, but we're most active on Instagram. And then my email address is Doug, DOUG @honorandequity.com. And then we also have our website, honorandequity.com.
Love that. And I love that you gave out your email because I always do that. And I don't know if it's industry specific, but I feel like a lot of people in the industry just go straight to their personal email or their work email, but I love that. So, anyways, thank you, Doug, for joining us today. And thank you everyone for tuning in to this episode of the CWS podcast. If you enjoyed the show, share it with a friend or subscribe and leave us a review. Until next time. Thanks, Doug.
Thanks. Have a good one.
Thank you for joining Lauren and I on this episode of the Creating Wealth Simplified podcast. Each week, we bring you expert education, experience, and information in a digestible format to help you identify investment opportunities so you can build wealth through real estate and take action toward your financial goals. Enjoy the show, share with a friend, or subscribe to the show and leave us a review.